Welcome to episode 139 of Destination Linux. This is a podcast of opinions made up of four of the greatest minds ever discussing our passion for Linux. I'm Ryan, and with me today are the three sages of Linux, or is that the three stooges? Noah, Michael, and Zeb.
What are you calling a stooge, buddy?
Now, this is a very special episode of Destination Linux, as it is being streamed live on YouTube. So we're very excited to share this episode with all of you, as well as a very special announcement. However, if you thought for 1 second that you could just tune in, get the message, and leave, you're wrong. We are going to drag this out for as long as possible. No, we won't drag it out too long, but we do.
But at least on 12 hours of the show.
At least 12 hours of the normal show. And if you're a patron, you've joined us behind the scenes, you know that Noah's not lying, that you get these shows that are an hour and a half to 2 hours every week. But patrons know that the show usually takes 4.5, 6.5, 7.5, 8, 12 hours to actually get those 2 hours of content.
Sometimes if Michael's without his main machine and he has to do it with just Michael for 24 hours straight.
Yeah, exactly. So before we get into the announcement, let's find out what everybody's been up to this week. Zeb, my friend, how do you like Arch? Because I know you're going to switch to Arch, right?
Well, it's funny you should say that, because I'm actually on Manjaro for this episode.
Nice.
I put the new 18.1 or 01 or whatever the version is, running XFCE, and it's very nice too. But this week, my Gen 2 saga has continued, and I think I'm turning into a bit of a Gen 2 geek now. So as I mentioned last week, one of the Gen 2 devs reached out to me and told me to update my system as Lucius has now been fixed. And lo and behold, it was, and it works. But what was interesting was I said in my email to Zeb that NVIDIA has been awesome in various ways. Let me just repeat that for Ryan. This is a Gen 2 dev saying that NVIDIA has been awesome in various ways. This is one of them. The hotfix is based on a long shot idea that I had for a possible cause based on the kernel development experience. They took my idea seriously, wrote a hotfix, and as of today have gotten back confirming that it works. So that just goes to show, Ryan, that NVIDIA is not all bad.
I never said they were all bad. They just need to open source their drivers. That's all. Then we'd be all friends. But no, on a serious note, I think that's awesome. We had news a couple of weeks ago about NVIDIA actually open sourcing certain portions of their drivers, and it's not everything we wanted, but it's a start.
And they're doing documentation, which is also good, which is not everything we wanted, but it's a good start.
It's a good start, and you got to give credit where credit's due. So, hey, if NVIDIA turns this corner and starts, really supporting open source in the right way, and supporting the devs out there, then, all this Team Green color I got everywhere will make a lot more sense, won't it? So thank you for that, Zeb. And Noah, what have you been getting yourself into, sir?
I did something kind of cool this week. I purchased, do you remember the old style Apple? I don't even think they were called iBooks back then.
You got an iPhone?
No. The little clamshell style colored laptops that Apple was made. Maybe they were called an iBook. I don't remember. But anyway, I bought one of those and I was like, I wonder if I could put Linux on it. Well, it turns out you can retrofit an SSD into them, which is the first cool thing because it makes it way faster. But then the other thing is, it turns out it runs DSL just fine. And I thought, well, that's pretty cool. I wonder if there's something else that I could use. Turns out it runs Crutchbang or whatever they're calling Crutchbang nowadays. But yeah, it runs Linux, and you can use it for some basic stuff. You can browse the internet. You can do some light text editing and some photo organization and stuff like that. And so for organizing files and just kind of, you want to get some looks in a coffee shop, take a 24-year-old or 25-year-old peach orangish laptop that looks like it's straight out of the 90s because it is straight out of the 90s, and connect it to a coffee Wi-Fi and goof around on it.
I love that because
it's pretty cool.
You literally made all the hipsters jealous because you went more hipster than them by bringing the old school MacBook in there. Like you hipstered everybody. So
here's where this motivation came from. It's kind of work in progress. Eventually, I would like to get to a place where I could use it as a daily driver. And so the thing that I like about that particular style of computer is the cases are massive. Like there's so much space. I mean, I could fit 3 modern Ultrabooks inside of the case for one of these little tiny, whatever they're called, iBook clamshells, I think. And so I started looking at it, and it turns out there's all sorts of mods that you can do to put, various different, upgrades and various kinds of things. And what I want to do at some point is get like a Raspberry Pi or something like that and mount it in there. The keyboard is difficult, but it's work aroundable. The brick wall that I'm at, that if anybody in the community can help me with, I would appreciate, is the display. The display has a very specific kind of ribbon connector and a very specific kind of ribbon cable. And from my understanding, the video signal was specialized to that particular motherboard. It's not like a standard VGA or HDMI signal, so you can't just cut the things off and solder new pins on. So if anybody knows how to do the display, that's the thing I can't quite figure out yet. And then I'll have to worry about the trackpad too. But that looks like that's the display looks like that's the harder part. So yeah, it's going to be kind of a fun thing to play with.
Very cool. And Michael, what have you been up to, sir?
So I've been doing, for the past couple of weeks, I've been working on the announcement that we're getting ready to talk about, and I can't wait to let you know. But I've also been doing some other things about getting my Arch set up as exactly how I want it. I still am working on that because there's quite a few things that you have to do. But overall, I've been putting a lot of effort into the coming announcement, and it's hard to explain in detail until we get to that. So once we get there, I'll be able to let you know.
We got to drag this on, right?
Yeah, exactly. It's not dragging it on. It's making the suspense increased and improving it, whetting your appetite for the information.
So Ryan, what have you been up to?
So I had the most amazing time yesterday. You guys know that we had to find a new venue for my local Coffee and Linux in North Georgia event. And we found a new venue, which was a awesome coffee house that was open to hosting us for very little cost at all, like $10 for the whole 2 hours. Rent a room and have this because we're a nonprofit, obviously. And I didn't know how many people were going to show up because we were moving locations. It was kind of a little bit of a mess, but we had a really good show up. We filled up the whole room with folks and we talked Linux. We had some new people show up. We had great discussions, but there was this moment of realization. I brought my Mycroft device there too that I built from a Raspberry Pi to kind of show Mycroft. And, people were kind of like, oh, that's cool, but it wasn't as good. Mycroft is good, but it's not as good as you kind of hope it could be or as useful as you hope it could be. But the coolest thing to me was when Bo was there, because it had nothing to do with the cool thing that he's a hacker and a pen tester and has all of these amazing stories about facing off with the NSA and all of these things. It was the moment that he gets a cup of coffee poured and he needs to mix the creamer into the cup of coffee. So he pulls a switchblade out of his pocket, opens it, and stirs the coffee with it. And at that moment, I thought, I will never be as cool as Bo, because the whole restaurant stops and is just staring at this dude casually stirring his coffee with a switchblade. And then he wipes, the switchblade off and puts it back into his jeans and just,
As long as he didn't knock his alcohol over with his gun while he was doing it, I don't see a problem.
He's just a cool dude. But no, I had the best time. We shared lots of stories and fun. And we also had someone, Brian, from the event say, hey, my office is right down the street and you're going to need a lot more space because this thing's growing. And we can hold, 30 plus people. So let's start having the event at my office. So now we kind of have a place where we can store stuff and have cool equipment that we can show off and do whatever we like. So we're going to try that next month. But overall, just really appreciate all the support from the community in Georgia for coming to the event. Some people traveling as far as Tennessee and other states to come to it. It's just really awesome to see that. So I had a ton of fun. So this episode of Destination Linux is sponsored by DigitalOcean. Now, DigitalOcean offers the simplest, most developer-friendly cloud platform. It's optimized to make managing and scaling apps easy with an intuitive API, multiple storage options, integrated firewalls, load balancers, and more. Now, I love DigitalOcean. I love DigitalOcean well before they ever sponsored Destination Linux, and I will love them for as long as they are around, which hopefully is forever, because when I started with Linux, a lot of people have made the comment, which is very nice, even at the lug, man, you've only been Linux for a few years and you've learned so much. You seem to know this whole gamut of info. And while that's not true, there's so much I still don't know. I honestly can tell you that one of the reasons why I learned so fast in Linux was because of DigitalOcean, because I could drop a droplet, play with different servers, play with different commands. And when I messed something up, I would just redeploy a new server and start over again. It was so simple to use, and it costs almost nothing. You can get all of this access to the world-class customer support for as low as $5 per month, or you can use their flexible pricing structure for as low as 0.7 cents per hour. That's darn near free. DigitalOcean also has 2,000 cloud agnostic tutorials. That means even if you happen to use another server, maybe you're forced to for work or something, their tutorials still will work across any cloud out there. So you can stay up to date with the latest open source software, languages, and frameworks. And you can get started with DigitalOcean for 1 month free with a $50 credit by going to do.co/DL. Now, it's really important you let them know that we sent you there. So use this link, do.co/DL. We couldn't be doing this or the special announcement and things coming up without the support of DigitalOcean. So a huge thanks to DigitalOcean for their sponsorship of this show.
So onto a section that we really love on this show. It's the community feedback, because you always come up with some good suggestions and good questions. So this week we've had an email from Brandon. Hi guys, love the show. I'm an avid listener. Missed Seb while he was out, but your recent guest hosts and interviews have been awesome. And I totally agree. The guys that stepped in for me and the girls were absolutely brilliant. So he goes on to say, in your episode 135 of the show, you discussed Huawei creating their own open source OS. So my questions are, what is to prevent Huawei from taking the publicly owned or open source version and tweaking it by adding loopholes and backdoors before it gets installed on their phones or devices? Is there a simple way to detect changes to the truly open source versions after it is baked into a phone or other device by a vendor? Isn't trust in the software or hardware distributor still required whether the product is based on an open source or proprietary implementation? I'd love to know your thoughts. Keep up the great work, Brandon. So it seems that this sort of question comes about every time anything is involving a Chinese company. And is that fair? Do we have any evidence of this? Now, Ryan, I know you're heavily into the phone side of it, and I'm sure that Noah can tell us about the hardware side, and then Michael's probably dug into all sorts of bits and pieces about Huawei. So how do you guys in the phone industry see Huawei and their product line?
That's an interesting question. So Huawei produces a lot of equipment that is used out there in telecommunications outside of just phone hardware. A lot of 5G technology is from Huawei. So there's a lot of companies out there that you probably don't hear commenting on this press who have Huawei equipment out there in the telecom industry. But going back to Brandon's question specifically, there really is nothing preventing a company from saying one thing and doing the other, right? They could, what do they call it, Michael? Washing open source?
Open washing, yeah.
Open washing, where they kind of say things are open source, but they really never go fully open source.
Or they'll use the open core term and then just kind of like taking the word open and trying to make it mean completely different things.
So to me, regardless of what the company's name here is, insert any company name here. And my my answer will be the same: is we have to wait till they actually do it, right? We have an OS that is open source that people can go out and look at the code and see what it's all about first. And then we have to kind of sit and watch and see how they treat the open source community, because it could be one of two things. One is they're just desperate to find an alternative until they can jump right back onto Android if the laws change and things like that. Or the other is that they kind of see this as a true viable option way forward to create a competitor to iOS, to create a competitor to Android, and they could build something truly awesome here. And if every company can get involved and help with it, well, that thing could really turn pretty awesome. With that said, I think there's more. While the news from Huawei is good, and they obviously have tons of money, billions of dollars to throw at open source and to create something here, I think we have a lot of cool alternatives out there right now in the open source community. You've got the work being done on UB ports. You, of course, have Sailfish OS that Noah is a huge fan of. You have the Pine64 phone out there. We've got so many great alternatives out there that I'm not going to hold my breath that Huawei is going to do anything fantastic, but certainly they have the pockets to, they have the ability and the connections to, and there's a lot more Huawei equipment in use than people probably realize, whether you have one of their phones or not.
I'd also say, as far as like it goes with the the open sourcing of it, you're going to have to trust any company that you just take the device and not change anything. Like that's kind of the case in general, because they could be changing stuff on the hardware side or the software side. And so they could open source the software, but the hardware has special things that don't make it actually compatible with the open source OS. So there's things that could be done, but there are cases where when we had Dalton on our previous episode, he was guest hosting. He mentioned how that if a phone was to be released, the open source operating system was released, if you can't take the phone, wipe out the OS, and then take your own build of the OS that they provide the source for, then there's something amiss in that situation. So that would be one way to test to see if it's like genuine structure, to like if you can build that OS back up and see if you get everything back to where it's supposed to be. So that's one way to do it. But there is going to be some level of trust involved, just in general, because there's no way for us to take a look at every piece, even the hardware pieces, even the phones that are open phones, right, or as open as possible. There's things that can't be open in those phones. So
Noah, along this line, you've been using Sailfish OS now for a few weeks. Any thoughts on this?
I think we're focusing on the wrong thing. It goes back to this idea of being a real geek, right? When I was a kid, I would go into Radio Shack, or I would go into Hobby Lobby, or whatever the hobby store was at the time, and I would purchase resistors, and I would purchase capacitors and batteries and 555 circuits and stuff like that, and I would take it home and I would build something, right? And when I watch my kids go into a Best Buy or a GameStop or whatever, they don't build anything. They don't build squat. They go looking for products of what can a company deliver to me, not what problems do I have, and not what things do I want to do in life. And so how can I use technology to solve problems and improve my life? They don't think about that. They just wander around blindly. I wonder what I could do with this stuff. And that's the way people, and that's how I see other people, adults even, that wander around electronic stores, right? What's like, you go on social media, you go on Twitter, you go on Facebook, right? All of these people that are so excited about the Apple event, they could care less. They don't go in and saying, I really hope Apple adds this because this would fix something. They just show up and just wait to find out what they're going to be given. It's like they're subjected to these companies, and it's very frustrating.
How many notches are we going to get this time?
Right, exactly, that kind of stuff.
How many ports are going to be removed?
So when we start talking about cell phones, I look at cell phones very differently than the vast majority of people look at cell phones. Now, I acknowledge it's not a market reality, so this is not something that I'm not going to change the way that the cell phone industry works. But I didn't buy this thing because of what it could do for me. I didn't buy this thing because some company said, "Hey, we produce this operating system. It has these features, and you're going to love this." I went the other way. I said, I want to buy a device that I can install whatever the heck I want to install on it. And guess what? Sony makes the Xperia Open Devices line. And so I can install anything that can run on an ARM processor can run on this phone. Anybody can design an operating system for this phone. UbiPorts can design an operating system for this phone. Sailfish OS can design an operating system for this phone. If Copperhead OS hadn't gone under, they could design an operating system for this phone. And guess what? They're going to get the exact same support from Sony on this device that Google got from whatever company they contracted to make this device, right? That's, to me, that is the perfect hardware phone. And then once we've identified the perfect hardware phone, we go to distro hopping, right? I'm going to go download some images. I'm going to install them until I find one I like. And I landed on Sailfish OS. If you didn't land on Sailfish OS, if you landed on what Lineage, that's fine. Whatever operating system you want to run on your phone. The point is, and this is kind of where I think I take a slightly different approach than the discussion we've been having, is I just want you to make that decision. I don't want to wait for Huawei to decide to make an open source operating system or not. I want Huawei to make a really good phone, and they're not invested in what operating system you run on that phone. And then on top of that, if they want to ship it with an open source operating system and it happens to work really great, I think that's awesome. But even if they don't, if they made a device that was, and Huawei's pretty decent about this from my understanding, if you look at any of the alternative ROMs that come out, technically most of them run on Huawei phones. As long as they're making phones that adhere to some sort of sane standard that other people can build operating systems, that's how we arrive at a Linux-like ecosystem on the phone.
So up next, the community feedback is Chris, and he writes, "Hi guys, ever as always, thank you so much for doing what you do. I look forward to the show every week. To business, I must respectfully suggest that Michael may be tilting at windmills with regard to his criticism of Canonical for keeping their Snap Store closed source. As near as I can tell, the only thing Ubuntu has kept proprietary are the website and binaries around the actual Snap Store. Not accurate. That is the infrastructure that presents the directory of snaps to the end users, and also the stores the binaries for download. Why does this matter even a little bit? From what I understand, all the tools to create the snaps are fully flawless. The configuration files for the creation of each snap are checked into source control. So if something awful happened and Canonical closes doors tomorrow, what would that mean? Someone else would need to stand up a new snap store, we'd need to re-upload all the snaps, and it'd be business as usual. Am I right? If not, what am I missing? And that's just my 2 cents. Thanks for everything you do, guys.
Before you address any of that, can we just point out that all we'd have to do is stand up a new snap store and re-upload all of the snaps? All you'd have to, that's a massive problem. Like, you'd have to get everybody's machine to point to a new snap store, and we would have to have we'd have to go collect all of these snaps and upload. So let's just start with the fact that that's a massive problem in and of itself. Be that as it may. What are some of the other inaccuracies with that, Michael?
Well, before Michael begins, what I want to point out again is that you guys are not allowed to write in and troll Michael. That is our job. We troll Michael.
That's not trolling anyway. That's just having
okay, never mind.
That's just having a different opinion. But that's not, right. Or just asking a question, really. But
right, you're allowed to do that, I guess.
Yeah, you could do that. That's fine. So the issue is that the Snap Store is, by being proprietary, the store itself, it means that we have to find to get all the snaps and relocate them. We'd have to actually write a new Snap Store, because standing up a new store doesn't sound that bad, but when you have to write everything from scratch to do so, it is a lot of work.
And you have none of the source code to do it.
Yeah, and you have no code to do it.
You don't even know what the process is.
Yeah. So we have that kind of issue, but we also have the situation where the Snapcraft tool integrates with Launchpad in many ways, and it also has integration with GitHub. So we have the ability to make the snaps. We'd have no way to facilitate the usage of them, as well as the Snapd daemon that runs the Snap structure is dependent on the Snap Store code that they have. So in ways, I'm pretty sure you can't even replace the Snap Store even if you want to now. You can install snaps independently from the store, but I don't think you can actually install, to replace the repo that the store used. So even if you did write a Snap Store, you wouldn't be able to replace it without completely wiping out the existing store. You wouldn't be able to have that store and a new store. That's one of the complaints in the beginning that Flatpak people had with the snaps, because with the Flatpaks you can have as many repos as you want, whereas the Snap Store is just a single repo. Now, I think that a central repo is a fundamental important piece to a project like Universal Formats. However, I don't think that the store necessarily being closed is a good thing. I think that if the store was open, there would be no real complaint. It'd be like cosmetic complaints. Like, for example, people don't want to load in their look at their mounted drives and see a bunch of loop drives in their system when they run a command.
People always find something to complain about, but there wouldn't be anything legitimate really
right.
left.
It would all be just cosmetic, and also the themes don't work that great in Snap sometimes, depending on the application. So there are some issues with Snaps in general that are not that important, but they are completely dismissed in the sense of how, because it's a closed source store, that actually is a big problem in some ways, because I'm not saying Canonical is doing anything wrong with doing it, or that they would do anything wrong because of it, but I am saying that at some point there is a possibility that Canonical could be having a new CEO or a new they have board of directors when they go public. That could happen. There could be some scenario where the worst of the worst thing could happen. I'm not saying it's likely. It's definitely probably not likely at all, but it's possible, and that's the entire point. If it was open source, it wouldn't even be possible.
Well, so just to throw a little shade on what you're saying too, Michael, have they not said that they want to move towards going public? And if they moved towards going public, would they not be controlled by a board? And if they were controlled by a board, does the possibility not exist that, Hey, somebody's gonna, like a Microsoft's gonna buy in and say, hey, you know what? This is a major asset, the SnapStore thing, because everybody gets their software from it. And let's go ahead and lock her up.
That's basically what I'm saying. Is like I probably didn't say it well.
I don't know if that's so far from likely.
Yeah. Well, I'm just saying. I think that, I don't know if it's possible. I mean, it's definitely possible, and I think and they are going public. That is a thing that they're going to do. Whether the result of that is negative or not, that's up in the air. If the store was open source, there wouldn't be that much of an issue if they did go public and got new board of directors and stuff. So that it's an issue that doesn't need to exist, and I don't understand why it does exist, because Canonical is a company that typically does open source software. Like everything other than the store is open. So why is this one piece not? When it's not like people would replace the store anyway, because there's no value in doing that. There's a central repo is important to us, universal store, but the possibility of the closed source backfiring on us, that is a thing that could happen. And if for some reason the Flatpaks go away and app images go away and snaps are the only thing, and then the board of director comes in and completely locks everything down, that would be a bad situation to be in. Because yes, they could lock down. They could say, yes, the Snapcraft tool is open and everything, but they could lock that down in the future, so future versions wouldn't be open. We don't know. It's just a possibility that I don't see a value in it being closed, and I see many, many reasons to have it open. So
Jacob in our chat, Michael says, since snaps are not dependent on the distro, each distro could have their own store and they could all be enabled at the same time. Canonical keeps saying that the snap should be managed by the developer and not Canonical, so installing a snap made by Red Hat should be pulled from the Red Hat repo.
Well, I agree that they do say that the developer should be controlling it, and they do technically. Canonical allows the developer to control the delivery, the updates, and all that stuff. The distribution of such is controlled by Canonical. And I don't think that that's necessarily a bad thing. I think that if a central repo is good because it makes it easier for people to know where these things are, and having a scattered universal format removes the benefit of even being a universal format. Like, not completely, but in many ways it does. So if you go to one store and everything that you want is in that store, that's the best approach. That's also why Flatpak started the FlatHub, because originally the Flatpak didn't have it and it was really confusing to find anything. So they created a FlatHub that's a central repo to get everything. That's the best approach. And they do offer the developers to have control, and I do think the developers should have control, not like repo maintainers having control. But I don't necessarily think that the repos, there should be also additional repos. There should be the ability to add additional repos if you want to, like an enterprise company wanting to deploy internal stuff. But I don't think that, every distro should have their own repo, just because that creates complications for no reason.
So interesting question. Generally, these things don't always have the easiest answers, but there you go. I think it's just something that they should get done, and I think it's a simple matter that could relieve a lot of, valid issues out there with snaps.
Absolutely. So although we've done 2 emails this week, we do want to continue to try something different. So if you've got some feedback that you can send in via a little video snippet, that would be really good. So send us a video comment showing us your tech favorite desktop, comment or suggestion, and we may feature it in a future episode. And don't forget that we still haven't had 10 videos shown, so there's still a chance to get some stickers and swag. So send your video links and or emails and comments to comments@destinationlinux.org.
So before we get on to the rest of the show, we want to take this time to talk to you about the very exciting changes that are happening for Destination Linux. That's why we decided to go live and stream this for everybody, so everyone can take part of this, because none of this would have been possible without all of you from the community. So Destination Linux has had some very humble beginnings. We were very excited when we started. It was just conversation between 2 guys. When I joined, me and Rocco, just sitting there talking about Linux, laughing so much we'd constantly get emails saying, hey, would you guys cut out the giggling? And other than that, your show's okay. But we just had a good time. And so we never expected this thing to grow into what it is today. Over the years, since the show has changed, Noah's joined, Michael's joined, Zeb, of course, went from producer to being a part of the show. It just exploded. And nothing could show that more than when we needed to raise funds to bring Zeb to America, and the whole community came together to make sure that happened. And that was the first time we ever got to see Zeb. And since that time, it's just continued to flourish. Tens of thousands of downloads, 107 countries. I mean, it's just blown up. And we could not have done that without you.
And what's important with that is that as we grow, we find new ways of giving back to the community and using our reach responsibly. So we want to help accelerate and promote the growth of open source and Linux. And to do that, we're going to ask our incredible community that is behind Destination Linux, along with others that share our core values. And we're going to be bringing you new content, new ideas, new values.
And that is why we are launching the Destination Linux Network. Our mission with the DLN is to bring the best of the community together and provide a welcoming, inclusive, and place for everyone to use, learn, and enjoy Linux and open source. So with these core values and stuff we've mentioned, it is important for us to take the next step in establishing Destination Linux as a company and legal entity. And this will allow us to create the partnerships and build a network that will help us take Destination Linux to the next level and many, many levels to come as well.
So the idea is this, right? What does it mean to you as the listener? What are you going to get as the audience? What you have to understand is how all of us came together, right? Each one of us, we're all capable of making content on the internet, and we're all pretty good at it, if I'm being honest. But the problem is discoverability, getting eyeballs on your content, right? I host the Ask Noah show. I answer questions every single week, and I think that information is valuable to anybody getting started with Linux or even somebody that's been doing Linux for a long time. If you want to stay up to date with Linux news, there is nobody doing a better job than Michael and This Week in Linux, and he does that every single week. And if you understand Michael, or if you know him, you know what a huge challenge that is for him to show up and do something every single week, and he does it for you because he cares about the community. And Ryan has such great in-depth and knowledge and insight into gaming news and stuff like that, and hardware and those kinds of things. And so he's able to do all of those things. The problem is there's no one central place that you can come to and say, I need a directory listing of, if I want hardware stuff, I go here. If I need questions answered, I go there. If I need absolutely world-class news coverage, I go here. When you need a central directory listing of that, the problem is every other model and every other organization that tries to do this, they try to suck up the content, right? And they try to own that content and they try and take it away from the creator. And what happens is creators get burnt out and they say, no, listen, I have my own ideas of how I want to present this content. And the truth is nobody does news better than Michael because he spends all his time thinking about how to present news each week. And nobody does hardware better than Ryan because he spends all week and every day and every night thinking about how to present hardware stuff and trying it and buying ridiculous amounts of it and then sending it to Michael and I when he's done with it 6 days after it's outdated. And then there's me, and I sit there and I play with stuff and I troubleshoot things and I charge people ridiculous amounts of money, and then I take all that information, I give it away on a show each week. And so that directory listing, that ability to come together and do something collaboratively without giving up ownership is an awesome thing. And that's something that we really believe strongly. And so, like Michael said, forming a legal entity around it so that we can handle things like finance and we can have some budgetary stuff and we can fund some of these things. That's why we're super excited to announce not necessarily we're all coming together and it's all going to be one network, but a partnership inside of a network where you, the listener, can get a directory listing and an idea of where you would like to see content. And when other people inside of the network do things that are tangentially related, we can come together and say, hey, you know what? Michael did this thing on the news. I'll bring him on to Ask Noah and we'll talk about it. Or Ryan covered this thing on a hardware thing. I'll bring him on to Ask Noah and talk about it. Or I answered some question that is particularly beneficial to Michael's show or Ryan's show or maybe even Destination Linux, and so they can bring me on to talk about it. And that partnership, I think, is what's going to make this really exciting and strong.
Yeah, it's basically the idea of taking open source and applying it to the network.
Exactly. So open source podcasting, you might even say.
Yeah, exactly. So we're going to start with a variety of different things. So first of all, we're going to start with some podcasts, and of course, you're going to get the Destination Linux podcast as a part of this network. But you're also going to get the Ask Noah show, This Week in Linux, and Linux for Everyone with Jason Evangelo. It will be
Wait,
joining
can you say that one more time?
Hold on.
Linux for
Did you think
Linux for everyone.
Jason Evangelo?
Yes,
part of the network?
I did mention that. I did mention that. In fact, we actually have a clip from Jason to cut to right now.
Hello, Destination Linux family. My name's Jason Evangelo. You might know me from Forbes or from the Linux for Everyone podcast. And I just wanted to jump in here and say that I am thrilled to be part of the Destination Linux network right out of the gate, because I really believe that what these guys are trying to accomplish is something that is seriously needed in the Linux community. There's a lot of podcasts out there, but there's not a lot that so tightly integrate the community into what they're doing and do it for the community, not just for their show, not just for, numbers and downloads and clicks, but to actually benefit the community and help the community and bring the community together. So congratulations, you guys. And I'm thrilled to be along for the ride. And believe me, there's a lot of exciting stuff down the road. All right, I'll talk to you soon. Bye.
So thanks, Jason, for that. And yeah, we're excited to have you a part of the network as well. And we also have other content that's coming in the works. So you get video content as well as not just podcasts. We're also having YouTube channels are going to be a part of it, including DOS Geek, Zebedee Boss Channel, and Dux Digital. And we're going to be doing live streams more with the community and a variety of different things. Also, the DLN is going to provide a hub for all of us to chat, network, and share the journey of their usage of Linux and open source with each other. And through this interactive tools, we're going to actually be launching a discourse forum. So the forum will be a part of the website. I'll have a link to it in the show notes, but also we'll get to that in a second anyway. And also, there's something that we want to do in the forums to kind of integrate everything about the network. So it's not just a forum, it's also an integration with all the different, every time a new episode comes out of every podcast, we're going to have a thread about that. There's going to be just a lot of integration with the forum. It's going to be a centralized hub for the entire network. So definitely, if you are interested in what we're doing with the network, you definitely need to join the forum, and we'll have a link to that in the show notes. And we've actually spoken about something, for many times about how Linux and marketing, it has its issues, right? We discuss this all the time. There's no need to rehash the specifics, really, but we receive feedback telling us, if marketing is so important, why don't you just do it yourselves? So, challenge accepted.
There you go. So bringing these communities together into the discourse forums, and we have tons of new content on the way, exciting content from people you are absolutely going to love that we're working on within the network. But you're going to have all these communities in one place on Discourse. We've announced we're looking for something else as well. We want to give back as a part of this network to make it something entirely different. We've announced we're looking for the community to pick the very first charity on the Discourse forum. So once you join the Discourse forums, and we're about to give the URL for you guys to hit it and probably crash the site here in a minute. But once we give that out, one of the first things I think you should do is check out all the awesome shows and content and people part of the network. But also go to this charity section and suggest the first charities that we should pick. And we're going to rotate this on a constant basis. We're looking for charities to work on things like privacy, security, the digital divide, and issues that are important to all of us. So giving back with this giant community and this giant network is going to be something that is a part of our mission, and we are going to definitely choose to accept it and not only bring marketing to the forefront with Linux, like other companies, unfortunately, outside of Linux have done better than us and than Linux in some cases. We're going to work on that with the power of this network. And we're also going to work about being, good patrons of the community and finding ways that we can give back with all the support and love that you've given us over the years. So what you can do right now is you can check out the podcast, the video content, and all the creators for Destination Linux network by visiting destinationlinux.network. That's destinationlinux.network, and be sure to join the DLN forum while you are there.
So we hope that you're as excited about the Destination Linux network as we are. There's so much more that we're working on and excited to share with you in the coming weeks. But until then, as Ryan has just said, please check out the destinationlinux.network. To get the latest news and see all the amazing content that we've put together to help bring these incredible communities together.
So just before our announcement, Manjaro also had a big announcement this week. Manjaro, like Destination Linux, has decided to take the next step in its growth of its popularity and has transitioned Manjaro into a legal entity and business. In their announcement, they state in order to effectively engage in commercial agreements, form partnerships, and offer professional services, A legal construct has been formed, Manjaro GmbH and Co. This move means that Philip and Bernard will be able to commit full time to Manjaro, which I think that news alone from forming the network is probably at least the most exciting thing for me, to think about that talent having access full time to making Manjaro even better than it is, which it's pretty darn good right now. This also means exploration of future commercial opportunities for the company. The team is also transferring ownership of all of its donations to a fiscal host, which will allow for transparency and allow for the team to approve donations for activities like sponsorships, local community costs, travel, hardware, and hosting costs. So Manjaro has continued to grow in popularity. It has, in my mind, I love Arch. I know that's shocking for a lot of you to hear, but what I love about Manjaro is that it has made Arch approachable and is one of the distros that many people know as the approachable Arch. And it makes it easy for the masses to experience it, to try it out without having to go through the initial pains of the install process. So Manjaro forming a business around Arch that can push the Linux desktop forward, to me, is a very welcome change. I am so excited about this for Manjaro and wish their team the very best on this new venture. And again, just having those two full-time amongst other developers that they could potentially bring on full-time developing Manjaro, I think huge things are in the works for that distribution.
Mm-hmm. I think for me, the exciting thing is maybe businesses outside of our little niche group will now see, hey, there's this thing called Manjaro. They started off as a hobbyist distro, maybe guys passionate about what they were doing, and in just a short space of time, because how long have they been going? Since about 2011, something like that. So in a very short space of time, they've gone from a community-driven distro to a business entity. So is that going to start showing other companies out there, hey, maybe this Linux thing is worthwhile, and we might start getting Linux laptops in Best Buys and other type of outlets?
Well, it's really important from a commercial business standpoint for them to have. We've come across this with Destination Linux. I mean, people want to do business with another business. They don't want to sign a contract with a bunch of individuals and then find out later, oh, those individuals just got busy and decided to stop doing that thing that we're paying them to do and deal with court fees and all of that type of stuff of trying to recover your money back. People want to do business with another business. There's some responsibility there. There's some foundation that they can rely on when something is turned into an actual legal entity there. And so I think it's really important for Manjaro's growth that they take this next step. And we could see how that has helped companies like Canonical and others, become kind of more of a foundation in Linux because they're actually a company. We've also seen how many distributions out there fold, right? Who would have thought Antergos was going to go away? I would have never guessed it. I saw no signs leading to that happening. And thankfully we got Endeavor. But again, I think having a foundation, having a business there that they're forming out of this and allowing the developers not to have to work, one or two jobs on plus do this on the side is a huge advantage to being taken seriously, and also help them create new partnerships with hardware, with software vendors, with developers. All kinds of new opportunities open up because of this. So I'm really excited about it.
So I think this is pretty cool that Manjaro is doing this. I think there's a lot of potential, and there's actually something I want to talk about in the sense that there's some people who are against the idea that Manjaro is doing this because it brings a business, a commercial approach to making a distro, and there's some philosophies about how that's a negative to it, and I think that's. I mean, honestly, I think that's.
People also are not people who probably spend their nights, weekends, and holiday vacations supporting a distribution on the side while they work a full-time job. Just a guess.
Probably not.
Have they looked at Canonical and Red Hat lately?
Well, yeah, the idea is, I think the bothersome they have is a company creating a distro versus a distro becoming a company. And Red Hat was started as a company and then made a distro, and same thing with Canonical. So I think that's where that comes from. But at the same time, I think that it's if a company is if they're able to turn it into a business and make it sustainable, there's so much value in that. Like Manjaro has been getting so much attention lately because of all the work they're doing for like support for gaming and that kind of thing. So that it shows that people are interested in it, and if they can sustain having people working full time to can just make it a better distribution for everyone, there is a lot of benefit to that. Because they also make open source tools as well that they provide for everybody to use. And other people have put those tools in other distros. So there's a lot of value in that what they're doing. And even if someone has a problem with it becoming a commercial, I think that they would have a problem if you tried to do any. I think they'd have a problem with the network if we created one, Like
I think it would be a great time for people to look back at episode 37, where we did an in-depth interview with Philip and Bernard of Manjaro. Take a look at that, and I think you'll get some fascinating insight back then, before this was a concept, and think about now how far they've grown. It's pretty awesome to see.
Absolutely.
And if you're worried about the community no longer having a reach, you can bet your bottom's dollar that the company that has joined with Manjaro to form this new organization is sitting there looking at the community, seeing how many donations are coming in from that community, and that helps them realize that, yes, this is going to be a driving force. So if people start to worry, decisions now are going to be company driven, as soon as those donations start to dry up because people don't like the way it's going, that will have a hard impact on, because let's look back, they started to bring in this office suite. Everybody was up in arms and they changed their views. So I don't think, just because they're a company, I don't think the community will lose that power of persuasion. If anything, because they're now a business entity, they have to they're going to have to be careful that they keep the money streams coming in, because unless you're a rich billionaire like Canonical's got, you're not going to have somebody just chucking money at a company to keep it going because they love Linux. So community, don't worry about it. You will still have the power to influence people.
Absolutely.
So Firefox actually has announced something really interesting. In our previous episodes, we talked about, we had a community discussion we made in the case where everyone should be using and supporting Firefox. And just in case you need some more reasons why, Mozilla has announced a new service that they're testing, the Firefox Private Network. Basically, it's a Proxy VPN. So now this service is currently in free beta, and it lets you use the public Wi-Fi more safely and securely. It may not remain free. We don't know for sure about that or not. And also the other caveat is that it's currently only available for testing in the US. So if you're in the US, you can test it. We don't know if it's going to remain free or not, but I think that this is the first sign of them creating a services thing. Hopefully, maybe it's just I'm optimistic, but I hope that that's what it is, the first time in creating a suite of services, which would be okay if they're doing that. I totally am fine with it. They state that they do not collect any information about your browsing, but do collect generic information about how you interact with the service, and they provide info on how you can opt out from this as well. So they don't collect on what you're doing, but they give information about how you're utilizing like connections to the service and that kind of thing. However, you can opt out of that as well. So that's really cool. So essentially, if you sign up, you can install an add-on, and very similar to like other extensions like Private Internet Access and other VPNs, that you just install the extension into your browser and then you're good to go.
Yeah, to be clear here, though, this is a proxy VPN. So what's the difference? PIA you can install on your machine, and all of the traffic leaving your computer is going to go through a VPN. That's whether software is calling out to the cloud or anything you're doing that has a connection to the internet has that VPN. This is a proxy where basically only the traffic that's going through your browser, in this case, because it's an add-on for just your browser, is going to go through basically a VPN service. So PIA has a very similar option, right? You can just install the add-on extension, and all of your traffic in just the browser will go through PIA. In this case, this is what this Firefox private network is starting out as, is just that proxy option, but it's completely free. I've been playing with it throughout the week. It's very fast. I've had no issues. Of course, it's in testing, so there's not a ton of people on it. There's not a ton of traffic, but so far it looks really good. The data is encrypted and sent through a proxy service partner, Cloudflare. I have seen some people be upset about the use of Cloudflare. I'm not sure. I haven't really looked into that, but it seems like no matter who gets mentioned, people get upset.
No matter what they pick, they're going to have something.
But it's important to know, again, that this is just a proxy server. So I don't want people to think this fully replaces a full VPN on your machine yet anyways. But I am super happy they're working on services. And it's very similar to what Opera did.
To be clear, Ryan, when you say I don't want people to think this fully replaces a VPN, it depends entirely on what you're doing. if your goal of a VPN is to obscure your traffic, and so when you go and Google something or browse something or sign into accounts you don't want to track, it is a full replacement for a VPN, yeah?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, if most of your traffic is going through there. However, if you start going and downloading, say, torrents, that's not going,
or checking your email in Thunderbird or whatever. But if you're doing it, but here, I guess the reason I point that out, or the reason I think it's noteworthy, is this. When people ask me about VPN technology and they say, I need privacy, I always ask them what their needs are. And if they tell me, well, I just want to browse privately, I tell them to download Tor. And I say, hey, go check that out. To me, This is just Tor Lite. It's not quite as advanced and privacy secure as Tor, but like Tor, it's just funneling through the Tor web browser. This is just doing Firefox.
There you go. But the only problem I've got with this is for me, it's a perfect statement here of saying something but not making it obvious what you're doing. And they state they do not collect any information about your browsing, but do collect generic information about how you interact with the service. What's the difference? What's the difference between watching where you're going or watching where you came from and how you got to where you're going to be going?
I don't know what specifically, because they didn't list out, but I'm guessing, because this isn't how most VPNs tend to list it out, is when you connected, what time you connected, where you connected from, what username, password you used when you connected. Those are generic services that most VPNs collect. What most people are concerned about, however, is what happens afterwards, the logging of where did you go, what website did you visit, then where did you go next. That's the piece that most people have a trust issue with VPNs, and rightfully so, because there are very few VPNs out there that actually have a proven history, like private internet access does, of being taken to court and being subpoenaed and saying, look, we don't have logs. You can sue us up, down, and sideways. We don't have logs, and we don't.
They tell them, come search the servers. Go ahead, look, have at it. Whatever logs you find, you can have. We don't find any logs. Exactly.
I'm guessing this sort of information would help Mozilla maybe do an advertising campaign, because all of a sudden they've now got 20,000 extra connections from Guatemala. So let's go and deliberately, I don't know, mail shot or something. Or I'm guessing it's just to let them know how and where their service is being used rather than what you're using it for.
Yeah, and the big key here is you can opt out anyway. So even if you're one of those people like, I don't even want that, fine, you can opt out. That to me was the important part. If they had left it where no matter what, you're going to have to opt in, it would have been a little bit like, just keep using PIA. But this was a good option here.
Yeah, and I also think that the Cloudflare thing is, if all the services to use, Cloudflare is probably one of the most reasonable options, because there's like if they were going to be like because Cloudflare started doing their own DNS thing, so like they have a really huge backbone of the infrastructure that you could utilize, and a lot of people do use Cloudflare, and I think there's just like a licensing thing that people have a problem with. I'm not really sure. I haven't gone to that depth yet. But Cloudflare is one of the main DNS providers these days now, because they actually have the IP address of 1.1.1.1, and you can connect to that and use that for your DNS. And that way you can avoid using Google's DNS, public DNS, and avoid using your ISP's DNS. So that's an option. So I actually think that it's interesting that they did choose Cloudflare, and I don't really see the problem in it. If you know more about this particular topic on that part, please leave a comment and let us know.
Yeah, no, I'm curious. A lot of people talk about spinning up their own DNS servers. I've not played with this yet, although I should probably take a DigitalOcean droplet and do it. Is that something you do, or do you use an existing one out there?
No, I think Bind is pretty much a fad. I think it's going to go away at some point. No, yeah, I mean, sorry. Yes, no, we have DNS. I mean, we have a company DNS server. I run a DNS server at my house, and then I've got one that's on the internet. The point of that DNS server is simply this. We use it for things like redirects. So, for example, when you go to, what would be a good example that I can give out publicly? When you go to podcast.asknoahshow.com, it is redirecting to a totally different server with a totally different URL and all of that stuff And to make that happen, and for the user to be totally transparent to the user, so they don't know that there's all these various different URLs that, whatever it is, podcast.fireside.fm/podcast/asno, whatever that thing is, it has a nice URL. And so we call that the director. And it basically, we put DNS entries in there for things. We also use it for things like clients. If they have a site and they're given a static IP, we own the domain cloudclientaccess.com. And so what we do is that URL or that domain exists to point to our DNS server, and the director, we add in the client's IP address and then put their business name as a record in for that domain. So if you had it might be dosgeek.clientcloudaccess.com would direct to your IP address for your business. And that way we can, when we install DVR systems, security camera systems, when we give people remote access to their VPN stuff, we just tell them for the host, put in your business name.clientcloudaccess.com, and then it redirects. And so for those kinds of things, we have to run a DNS server.
Gotcha.
CentOS 8 is something that you should check out. Make sure to check that out at centos.org. Also, Mumble got an update. After nearly 10 years, Mumble finally got a new full release, 1.3.0. This release contains over 3,000 commits compared to the prior version with 1,600 parent commits. Now, some of the new highlights include new design themes with Mumble Light and dark themes. I tell you what, I cannot use applications unless they have dark themes available. I can run it in the back. It totally screws up my productivity. And that sounds like a first world problem. It sounds like that way because it is that way. It is a first world problem, but I have to have a dark mode in order to be able to use the software efficiently. They also have individual user volume adjustments, which is fantastic for those of us that do production, because now we can have individual people joining the show and we can adjust their volume so that everything comes out very consistently without having thousands of dollars worth of equipment, which is what I had to do when we first started using things like Mumble. There's a new bindable shortcut key for changing transmission mode. So if you've ever used Mumble, there's 3 ways that you can communicate. You can talk into your mic and have it pick up by voice, or you can push on a button and have it activate that way. Like I said, 3. And so this is going to allow you to have a shortcut to change between those 2 transmission modes. Dynamic channel filtering to manage large communities. So if you have a Mumble server that has 50 channels and you only use 4 of them, you can say, hey, just show me the 4 of them. Additionally, they're going to allow you to filter channels based on how many people are in the channel. So if you have... So if you go into a Mumble server, there's 50 channels, only 3 of them have people in them. It will just show those 3. You can have it hide channels that don't have any available users in them, which makes a lot of sense. Multi-channel recording for synchronous, even after hours of recording. Optional clock in the overlay. I'm not sure why you would want that, but if you do, it's a thing that they have now. Improved user management for admins, as well as banning management and the ability to remove certain user avatars. Every Mumble community that I'm in right now has a group on Telegram or Discord or Slack where they track who has to be banned and who has to be here and who needs a new cert and who, because there's no tools for that. So Mumble is going to do that. The interesting thing about Mumble is this, right? Opus is the future of technology. And I'll go out on a limb and say 2 things. Opus and SIP are the future of IP voice technology. And so if it's not using Opus and SIP, chances are it's not going to be around in 10 years. And Mumble has been and continues to be one of the most reliable Opus voice chat platforms out there. And while Discord and other competitors have tried to come up with more impressive features and more impressive UIs and stuff like that, frankly, they suck. And Mumble has continued to hold its own for stability and also just pure raw functionality. The amount of times that I've seen somebody on Discord where something is not available or site didn't load or the server was down or whatever happens all the time. You just don't see that kind of thing with Murmur, which is the server component of Mumble. So it's great to see some really great enhancements that are coming from Mumble. One of the first programs that I install, something I use literally daily, that's absolutely awesome. And I'm glad to see that they're continuing to make progress with it, because it's a very, very useful tool on Linux. Actually,
it's interesting because I started out when my journey into Linux, I was using Discord because that's where all the people in Windows were, and
Sure.
used Discord for gaming and all of that. So when I came over to Linux, I was happy. Discord was still there and it worked fine. And then one of the servers, in fact, one of the first servers I dropped in DigitalOcean to kind of learn things was Mumble, because I heard people in the Linux community talking about Mumble. And I thought, looking at screenshots kind of looks dated a little bit and things like that. So I'll probably stick with Discord. And then as soon as I got a Mumble server up and running, I fell in love. Because while it didn't have all the fancy GUI stuff going around, it worked all the time. It's never down. It never crashes. And it's a part of the patron perks for my channel is you get the access to the Mumble server. And people use it all the time because it's so fast to get connected, start gaming. It uses so little data that when I'm live streaming gaming and things, which is using tons of data, it doesn't cause interruptions and stutter and problems transmitting the voice. It's just, I love Mumble, man.
Yeah, it's low resources on the system too. Like the Discord is using a lot more resources than Mumble does.
Oh, sure, but it's encoding everything over a web browser. But or even if you're not, then you're using you're using a Chrome wrapper to encode everything into a web browser, right?
Pretty much, yes. But also, the protocol is really what's impressive about Mumble is how clear the audio sounds in Mumble, but how little data it uses is impressive.
That's Opus. That's Opus, right? And that's why I said the future of IP communication technology, voice over IP, is going to be Opus. So I work in the broadcast industry, and one of the things that we have been doing for years is they are constantly reevaluating codecs, right? And so when I got into the broadcast industry, what I was told was, you want to use AAC. Everything is encoded in AAC because it sounds better, it works better, all that stuff, right? And what you've seen is just in the last 4 or 5 years, basically since 2015 when I started Ask Noah show, what you've seen is a slow transition over to Opus, and everything sounds better, everything works better. And like you said, Michael, it's a way more efficient codec. It's kind of like the difference between FLAC and WAVE, right? Both of them are considered lossless audio codecs, even though FLAC technically isn't, but they're both considered lossless audio codecs, but the FLAC file size is, just a fraction of what an uncompressed PCM audio file is. And the reason for that is because it's a much more efficient codec, and Opus is that codec as well. And so you're seeing Opus pop up in everything from when you see HD voice on a lot of cell phone plans, a lot of those are utilizing Opus, or they're using G722. And all of the new technology that involves with any of the WebRTC stuff, when you connect to a voice conference thing, or I would not be surprised if whatever this software, Zoom, is using Opus under the back end too. All of those things are based off of Opus because it's such a reliable, efficient codec, and that started with software like Mumble. And you're right, Ryan, it doesn't look great. It has needed a refresh for a long time. But what you find is once you get past the horrific UI, it functions great.
Never stops. Yep, it's perfect.
So what's weird about that is that the new version of Mumble's design looks way better. There's such a huge improvement, and I can't tell you how important it is that they got rid of those ridiculous lip icons. If you haven't seen it, just go search DuckDuckGo or Start Page Images and just look for Mumble UI, and you'll see these weird lip icons, and it's thankfully they are gone now, which is
and Tyler
awesome.
says, and this is another reason why, of course, Michael was going to support Mumble. It's Qt5, so it has high DPI support now as well. So
that too. Yeah. And just so you know, the Destination Linux Network is, we not only are fans of Mumble, we are actually working on setting up a Mumble server. It's not available yet, so we're not going to give out an address or anything, but it is coming soon. So as we said, a lot of things are coming soon. We are actually having some more announcements in the future. One of those will be including Mumble.
Nice.
So up next, we have some news about RawTherapee. And no, it's not that which the Destination Linux hosts need after coping with Michael's scenes. It's actually a cross-platform raw image processing program. And there's been a plethora of bug fixes and speed optimizations under the hood. So the program is available as an app image. So if you want to check it out, just head over to the site, download the program, and add execute permissions and go. So 5.7 includes features like film negative tool for easy developing of raw photographs of film negatives, support for reading rating tags from EXIF and XMP, and those are actually shown in the file browser FilmStrip. There are new raw format support or new raw formats support. I thought raw was raw, so I'll be interested to find out what these new formats of raw are. And there's speed optimizations with the interfaces amongst lots of other bug fixes. So we have a lot of people in the Destination Linux community who are photographers and some professional photographers, like one of our guest hosts, Wendy Hill Photography. So I'll be interested to find out later on what they think. So Do any of you guys use these types of programs on your photographs that you take?
Potentially, when I put my Canon expensive camera in auto mode, it may do that. Who knows? Because I never take it out of auto mode.
So I have used these tools not well, like definitely not a professional. So I have a little bit of experience with them, but I wouldn't say it's like that much experience. So we actually did talk to Wendy on a previous episode. We'll have a link in the show notes for that episode. We talked to her about RawTherapee and Darktable. And as far as the RAW format goes, I do know a little bit about that. RAW is like a type of format, but there's actually like many, like dozens of different types inside of that format. So RAW is like just the concept of it.
It's like a standardization where there's no standard.
Well, it's a standardization that has multiple versions inside of it. Yes.
Oh, so it's open source.
Exactly.
So we'll take the raw format, and then let's say we've got a dozen raw formats, and then we'll create a standard, and now we just end up with 13 raw formats.
Yep.
I get the picture.
Absolutely. It's perfect.
That sounds a lot like open source, actually.
It does a little bit. Yeah. So the LVFS, or the Linux Vendor Firmware Service, is actually getting a new vendor. So the LVFS plays a critical role in providing hardware support for vendors with the ability to upload firmware updates via the FWPUPD open source daemon, or FWPD. The LVFS.
Is that on how can you pronounce? Because that's perfect.
Maybe. The LVFS has already secured support for most major vendors like Dell, Lenovo, Logitech, System76, HP, Intel, MSI, AMD, and more. So now we can welcome Acer to that family. So Acer has been evaluating the services up to this point, but is finally uploading the firmware updates through the service. So if you're utilizing an Acer laptop, you may start to see some firmware updates options become available pretty soon. If you've enabled the FWPD service, if you use an Aspire A315 or A315, you'll be able to get the available today. It's already available right now. So as Linux grows, it's actually really cool because these more vendors are taking up the usage of using the LVFS, making it a lot easier to do something that people back in the day were incredibly scared to do, including myself, to update their firmware.
Yeah, not only were they scared to do it, but let's be honest, if you had a piece of equipment and you went onto a forum like a Logitech mouse and you were having problems with it and they said you need to update the firmware, your option was to put Windows into VM or boot to Windows to get that firmware update. So this is a major improvement, in my opinion.
Respectfully, I think it goes even further than just that, right? Because it's not just a function of having to boot into Windows. Even if you had to run it as like a binary program, like they had a download, you go to the site, you download, and you do all that stuff. The nice thing about these from what I understand, the FW update, the way it works is it actually rolls it into your package manager. So once the package manager is aware that you have that device or that thing, it just automatically pulls the update down and applies it for that device. Am I right about that?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I don't know if it automatically updates it, but it certainly notifies you that update is available.
It's available, yeah.
They have certain tools like that will tell you in certain portions of the GUI tools, like System76, for instance, to tell you, hey, you have these updates. If you want to apply them, they're there for you to update. But yeah, this is absolutely fantastic and crucial to really the adoption of hardware vendors making Linux-only devices, because it used to be you didn't really update firmware all that often. It also used to be you'd go buy a video game and you got mostly the complete video game. Well, nowadays things are different, right? Firmware gets updated a lot. When you buy a new video game, generally it gets 15, 16 updates before it's actually stable. Things have changed. Things are weird now, but that's a thing. And this allows Linux to be competitive in the market. And when you look at the brands that we have, and by the way, we only listed, maybe the top 6 or 7 that are recognizable, but it just goes on and on and on about the LVFS partnerships that they've made. But all of the major ones are covered there, from Dell, Lenovo, Logitech, HP, Intel, MSI, System76, AMD, all of them are there. So that to me is critical, that you have those major components there to get your firmware updates in a simple tool. It's very easy to install. You can go out onto a website, get the instructions for it to get the daemon running, so that as soon as an update's available, boom, you'll have it, and you can decide if you want to apply it or not.
Awesome.
So just when you thought it couldn't get even more exciting than our announcement today, Pine64 have dropped another surprise. We've got the Pinebook Pro. We've got the Pine phone. And now they're talking about the Pine smartwatch. So they haven't given us any hard and fast times yet, but what they've said is it will be around about $25. It will come with a nice charging dock. There'll be a 20 millimeter wristband size, a heart rate monitor, zinc alloy and or plastic. Oh, it's made of zinc alloy and plastic. It will have a multiple day battery. And I think that what they're waiting for at the moment is for some developers to get in touch with them and say, yep, we're happy to work with you for this, and we can start building these things. So it depends on how quickly the software can be made available to work on the kit, but it looks like we might be getting this in Q1 or Q2 of 2020. So whilst this is fantastic, are they stretching themselves a little bit too far? Should they be concentrating on...
Nope.
They're not. Okay.
No, and here's why. So 3 things matter when you're trying to get a product and or really a brand, because they're not building a company, they're not building a product, they're not building a service, they're not building an operating system, they're building a brand. And I think there are 3 things that are important when you're building a brand. And the first one is that you have one place to go. The reason that I buy so many Pelican cases is because I know that when I want to buy a case that's going to protect my equipment, Pelican is going to make a case for that. Are they expensive? Yes. Do they have a lifetime warranty? Yes. Are they absolute stellar quality? 100%. And so I know I buy a new laptop, I go buy the Pelican case board. Whatever it is, camera equipment, analyzing equipment, Wi-Fi analyzing equipment, cable modem equipment, we put it in a Pelican case because I have that one company to go to. Now, if Pelican only made laptop cases, I would have to go, to one company or to the other. I don't even think about it. I know if I'm buying a case, I'm going to Pelican. And I think what they're trying to do is they are trying to make technology for everybody, right? What does everybody need in a day-to-day laptop that you can open up and use, and how inexpensively can we make a quality product? And then they've gone back and said, okay, let's try and do that with the phone. And now they're going to say, let's try and do that with the watch. And if you think about the 3 things that people use in order are phone, watch, computer. I'd say the vast majority of people are most interested in purchasing themselves a phone. Then they're interested in purchasing themselves a smartwatch. And then a lot of people just use their work computer. And if they purchase a third electronic device, it's a computer. So I don't think they're stretching themselves too thin. In fact, I think what they're doing is staking their claim as the one technology company you can go to buy your technology. And if you look at how well things like the Pebble did, I think there's absolutely a market in an open source smartwatch. We just need a company like Pine64 to make it.
Excellent.
Especially at this price point. I mean, they just shock and awe constantly with the prices. Like when I saw the price, I'm like, that's got to be a mistake.
Yeah, that seems ridiculous.
Right.
It's $250, right? Not $25.
And look at it too. It's it doesn't look like some hacked together piece of crap. It looks like a quality timepiece.
Well, this is Zeb, why they're not stretching themselves too thin, because unlike some other people who are trying to get into this arena, they're using established hardware that's out there and then telling that company, saying, here's the specs, here's how we want it to look, and make some changes to something that's tried and true, versus sitting there trying to mill their own device from scratch, which then, yes, if they were milling every single device they created from scratch, we would probably be stretching themselves too thin. But they're doing this the smart way, and they're obviously going to spend their time, instead of trying to, re-engineer a watch from scratch, they're going to spend their time working with the developers to get the software right and make sure developers have developer kits ahead of time so this thing works very well. And I can tell you that these watches, while to me it's frustrating to have another thing dinging at me all the time, I have had some of the watches from both the Android and the Apple Watch and played with these for weeks and months at a time. And there is some neat things that they offer out there that, again, I just get so many emails and messages a day that it wasn't for me, but I get why some people, like my wife, absolutely love theirs. And the life-saving technology that these watches also have with this heart research that they've done, there are people who have been able to predict ahead of time that they're going to have a heart attack because their watch is going off, and this has a heart rate monitor in it saying, hey, for some reason your heart is accelerated at ridiculous levels, and people go to the hospital and find out they were just about to have a heart attack, or they were within days of having heart attacks. This stuff is absolutely life-saving and amazing, the technology behind it. And I love that Pine64 is getting involved in it. And I just love this company. If there was a company and I just love their face, it's Pine64.
Here,
Yeah.
let me put on a tinfoil hat for just a second. You talk about life-saving technology, and while I agree that's an important thing to consider, also consider this. When it comes from a company like Apple or Google or any of these other companies that have a vested commercial interest rather than an interest in your privacy and your security, what's to stop these companies later on down the road from partnering with, I don't know, medical insurance companies and saying, hey, these people who constantly have tachycardia, we're going to release that information, or the 23andMe with there's third-party doctrine allows them to do anything they want with that information. What's to stop them from doing that?
It's not only a possibility, it's going to be the case, right? This is the same thing with people taking their the cars from their insurance companies and plugging a device into their car. And they get the writing right now that says, well, our company, when you plug that device in your car, is not going to use that information to ever ding you. And
we'll give you $15 off your car insurance every 6 months.
Yeah, but the insurance companies know that everybody switches insurance companies a lot. Like this is a big thing. You got a 70% turnover probably in this market of people switching every 5 years. Right. So the first time they're not going to use it, but they can sell that to another competitor who may now decide that you hit the brakes all the time and you drive too fast, and now we're going to charge you more for insurance. So
that's exactly
I think Apple certainly in this case is far more trustworthy because they don't make their primary money off of advertising yet. But that doesn't mean they won't in the future to compete with Google and other things. Google, I definitely wouldn't be sticking their watch on my wrist anytime soon, but I would stick a Pine64 watch on my wrist any day of the week.
So where we get to is if you look at something like the Pine people, I feel like I can actually trust them when they say they're making a device designed with my privacy in mind, and when they design a watch that is designed for a company that has privacy and security and values open source in the community. So to me that's a whole nother that's 50% of the reason why I would be interested in a smart device from this company.
Yeah. I agree. I think the Pine64, they're doing a lot of stuff. And also the hardware aspect of them being able to do this kind of thing is because they've been doing hardware way before they started doing even the Pinebook. Like the Pinebook has been around for a year and a half or so, maybe even 2. And they're kind of like ramping up after they've gotten the experience with those products and making a new, like a full type of product approach. But they've been doing system on a chip boards and stuff like that for many years. They've been one of the go-to competitors against the Raspberry Pi for many years as well. So like the Rock Chip 64 has been a very sought after board for a lot of people. So they've been in the space for making hardware, even on a small, like the small type product hardware, for a very long time. So I think that they're in a good position to be doing it. And also we got information from Lucas from Pine64, who said that if we wanted to talk about it, he wanted us to mention that the dev kits will be going out for the watch, but somewhere between late October and November-ish. They don't really know exactly when, but that's pretty soon for them to be already working on a dev kit. And the rough estimate of a Q1, Q2 2020 is likely possible depending on how quickly the software can be made for the watch. So I'm super excited. And I actually, at one point, I said, when Pine makes these new products, I'm basically going to get all these products. And because of their prices, they make it possible to buy every single new product they're coming out for these new lines. And it's still reasonably priced for all of it. And that's just ridiculous. And when I was talking to Lucas about this new latest thing, I sent a message to him. I was like, could you calm down a little bit, because you're blowing my mind too many times too often.
Microsoft continues to push this narrative that they love Linux and they're going to market Linux, and that Linux has some integrations and is now a grassroots conference to push this agenda. So on March 10th and 11th, Microsoft will be holding the WSL conference in Redmond, Washington. The conference will be 2 whole days of hands-on workshops, hackathons, presentations, and networking. The conference will be free, but you will need to register. They're looking for speakers, so you can sign up at wslconf.dev. Microsoft is clearly trying to secure developers and the hearts of the community, as well as the small business world. Community events like this can have a big impact on getting developers' attention and building a fan base around WSL, which continues to get better with every release, supported by Canonical, Debian, Kali, SUSE, and OpenSUSE. Linux itself has a major marketing problem, as we've discussed before, and we hope DLN can help provide some exposure to Linux, not just as a great cloud and server OS, but also as a great desktop solution. Microsoft is taking some approaches here that show how serious they are about Linux and are looking to build a fandom of its work with nobody challenging it. They've got an easy road ahead of them.
This is kind of like a bittersweet, isn't it, to me, to read this news? Like in some forms, I feel like this is a natural move for Microsoft, as I talked about running into that employee one time and them stating, yeah, we love Linux because it's great for our stock. That this is kind of a natural next form. They know how to get into the community. They are marketing Linux better than many of the companies who've been in Linux for decades and decades market Linux. They also know the power of a grassroots event here. So I honestly, this is the natural move, in my opinion, for Microsoft to push WSL. And it's interesting that they are continuing to push it and build upon this.
It makes sense for Microsoft to be doing this kind of thing. And I think that they are doing the right thing in sense of what's good for their business and, trying to push out the, all the effort that they're trying to say that they're doing about the Microsoft loves Linux and all that stuff. And they are doing things that is good things that they're doing. But WSL is one of those things that technically speaking is good, but at the same time, why are we helping them? That kind of thing. Like if Microsoft was doing all the work to make Linux work on WSL, then okay, fair enough. But they're not. There's a lot of people helping them out making this work. So we're spending time as a community to help them remove reasons to use Linux or something. I don't know what that is, what that's all about. But the conference does make sense that they're doing it, and I think that there's also something we should talk about in the sense that, recently on Twitter there was a employee of Microsoft talking about how they wanted to know if we'd be interested in doing a OneNote, if the Linux community would want a native client for OneNote. And so I'll have a link to that in the poll if you'd like to vote on that in the show notes. But it's interesting because it shows that some cases they are interested in doing it, and some it's kind of like Microsoft is such a huge corporation that some pieces make sense and that they seem legit, and then other pieces are like, well,
this reminds me of what Noah said one time, and I don't remember if it was related to Microsoft specifically or not, but there are a lot of people that listen to this show that are employed by Microsoft. Mm-hmm. They just happen to be employees of Microsoft. And Noah, one time you said, hey, the best way to change companies and their culture is to do it from within, right? Have a bunch of employees that love Linux, love open source, and love privacy and security, and they get into major positions within these companies and can truly change things. I think the problem here is there is just a lot of bad blood that's been here for a while. And I also think, to your point, Michael, that we seem to bend over backwards the second anybody gives us attention from one of these big companies that we've been fighting against for years. And it's great that they want to get into open source and they want to learn and use some of the advantages of the community. But should we bend over backwards to set up WSL and make sure it's patched and secure and do all the work for them on the back end? I have a hard time justifying it. Maybe somebody one day will send an email where it seems justified, but I don't get it. I think if Microsoft wants to do that, they should put some real effort into making that work and happen. And that would go a long way into proving their commitment to Linux and open source if they were the ones building out the distributions for WSL and supporting them and applying the patches and everything else. You don't see that. You see Canonical and others going in there and kind of building this stuff for them. And that to me is, I don't know, maybe there's something behind the scenes I'm not aware of, but the one thing behind the scenes, or the one thing that makes sense to me from a business perspective, is most of the companies representing Linux today do not really focus or have much care anymore for the desktop. They're focused on where Linux is dominated, which is the cloud. And I think they make the wrong assumption that there's not a ton of money available to be made and growth potential focusing on the Linux desktop. And I think that's a mistake that they're making.
Yeah, and I think that they are putting some effort in that is, like, you're right in the sense of, like, the history of Microsoft against with Linux is decades of just atrocious, horrid actions. So now we have like 4 or 5 years of a new person in charge with Satya Nadella, who actually is making a transition in many, many ways for the better. However, he's trying to pivot a company that is so huge that it's going to take a very long time. And there is signs that they're going to be doing something that's good, but you need to do something that is good for the ecosystem, not just your bottom line. And most of the time when they release something new, every time they've released something, I go, okay, that's for business services, that's for the servers, that's for the enterprise thing. It's not for the community. It's for it's different to say that it's for their bottom line. And if Microsoft came out and said Microsoft hearts the money that we get from having services with Linux, that would be different than saying Microsoft hearts Linux.
Okay, I agree with you to a point, Michael, but the other, and in fact, it's one of those things where I have to bite my tongue anytime I read stories like this, right? I have to bite my tongue anytime we talk about it, or I'm going to just crap all over this entire story and this entire announcement because that's how I actually feel about it, right? But there is a line, and if Microsoft can't really make any money, it's not beneficial to their bottom line. Why should they concentrate on it? Like, at the end of the day, I get what you're saying, and I agree with you. If they want to really love Linux, they should actually focus on the community because that's what Linux is about. But as far as where they spend their money and what projects they invest in, it makes sense that they would do things that make them money.
There's a difference thing, but they would still make money. And this is not changing. They wouldn't change. Like, for example, where
do they make the most money, though?
Right. Well, that's the thing. Like, if they first, but they don't have to come out and say, we heart Linux. That's what they decided. They decided to come out and put themselves in that position because if you're going to make that claim, that you have to prove that claim because there's been decades of Linux is a cancer and Linux and open source is going to ruin the world and all that other stuff that they said in the past. If you're going to make a claim that you're changing, you have to prove that you're changing. That's all I'm saying. Or
just come out and say, hey, you know what? We don't really care for Linux. We would prefer that everybody use Windows. If everybody's going to use Linux, we're going to find a way to make a buck off of it. So here's what we're going to do to make that happen, and we'll support you to the extent that it's a mutually beneficial relationship. Sure. If they came out and said that, I would believe them at face value. I would take it and go, fine, let's run with it. Fine, Microsoft Teams is running to Linux. That's awesome. I'm never going to use it, but I'm glad that it's there.
Yeah, that's basically the perspective I was saying.
The bigger problem is with all of this, Microsoft's doing what any business would do, and we could make the argument that we've changed that target for what we expect of corporations, right? Everything is money, nothing's back to the community. So therefore, anybody that does anything for money, it makes sense. We can argue that over the ages, we've moved that target to where companies basically the only thing we expect from them is to go out and make money and give nothing back. But the one thing that bothers me the most is that how the Linux community, the companies represent the Linux community, have reacted to the news, right? Microsoft's doing a better example advertising PowerShell than Linux has, which has had the power and more powerful terminal application for decades. And Microsoft comes out and releases PowerShell and does a marketing commercial for it that blows away anything that any company that represents Linux has ever done. And it got so much attention, and this is the problem. And this is why DLN, I think, is so important, because being able to properly market the power of Linux on the desktop is something that's severely missed. And I think it's because a lot of the companies that represent Linux as a corporation don't care about the desktop very much anymore. They cared about it to grow, but they don't care about it anymore because the money's in the cloud and everything else. And I think that's a mistake from a business standpoint, because I think there's tons of money to be made. I mean, there's $2 trillion corporations out there right now that made their money off of desktop computing. So there's a lot of money to be made here that is being ignored.
Yeah, I agree with that. And I also would say that, the point about how the network is actually going to help us, bring more attention to the desktop, I totally agree with that. And actually, what's interesting is that the employee from Microsoft who made this tweet about OneNote actually came to us and asked us for our opinion about what was happening. So they came to me and wanted to talk about what I set up, because I was so adamant against Microsoft, but not in the sense that Microsoft has no chance of ever changing my mind, just that they have a very big mountain to climb. And if they want us to hand them the grappling hooks to climb, they actually have to prove that we're not just handing over the entire thing to them. So in the conversation, we were actually talking. I was talking to him about it, and he was like, "What is the things that we could do?" It's like, well, you have a big thing because of all the years and years of anti-Linux that was coming from that company. So basically, they just need to make a gesture that would benefit Linux and not necessarily hurt Microsoft, because that's not a requirement. I even said they don't even have to open source certain things. They just have to make those work on the platform. One of the things I mentioned was Microsoft Office and OneDrive or OneNote or whatever that's called. And the employee was like, I appreciate your thing. We had a nice conversation. And then a couple hours later, the tweet happens that they're making a user voice voting system to talk about bringing OneDrive to the thing. So just being upfront about your opinion of it, it actually does seem to be beneficial. And I think since they are bringing they're willing to listen to us, and the fact that more employees are going to Microsoft that actually are wanting to change the structure of that company is a very good thing. And as Ryan pointed out that Noah's talked about like Red Hat being joining IBM to improve the structure of IBM, having people becoming part of Microsoft who care about open source and want to improve the thing is a good thing, and that's a good example of them wanting to do it. And I think if they were to bring OneDrive, that's a significant gesture to actually hardening Linux.
Well, here's an interesting one for you guys. If Microsoft do heart Linux, let's get Satya on here for an interview.
Let's do it.
That'd be interesting.
We called him out. You gotta be here. You've been warned. So if you're an old school arcade gamer, you probably remember a game, and I've mentioned other games being like it before because it always holds a special place in my heart, called Smash TV. Do any of you, Noah, Zeb, Michael, Noah, do you remember Smash TV in the arcades? All right.
No.
That's just a shame.
Not by name, but
Smash TV was a quarter-stealing, high-intensity shooter with great taglines like, I'll buy that for $1. You'd hear screaming amongst the arcade machines.
Yes, I got that one. Yeah.
Okay, you remember that. Yeah. So, man, I miss arcades in the malls and things, walking into a room and having all the dinging, binging, and arcade shouting. But anyway, so there's a lot of nostalgia for Smash TV. And one of the games that I think plays on that, although they don't directly say it, is a game called Calamity TV Show. So this is released by Immaterial Studios, which is such a cool name, and available for Linux right off the bat. You get fast and intense action, challenge your skills with several levels of difficulty, crazy dialogue and characters, which is a must for the Smash TV type stuff. Killer soundtrack. You cannot play this, they say, without headbanging. 2-player couch co-op, which is double the fun. 19 levels of varied gameplay. 5 chapters with boss fights, beautiful 3D graphics to display all of the enemy types and customize your gear with various weapons and hero modifiers out there. So if you are someone who loved Smash TV or that type of game, lots of action, check Freakout Calamity TV Show out there. I think you'll like it.
Sounds good. So just before you move on, Michael, this is a special episode. We've made a fantastic announcement, and now we're going to have an announcement called Zeb's Revenge. So, Ryan, your challenge for next week, is the same enthusiasm that you just gave for Smash TV. I'm going to put a link. I want you to do a review of that game.
Is it the one I sent you?
Michael knows you have got to review that game next week on Destination Linux.
With the same enthusiasm and passion you have for that little red company that makes those knockoff video cards.
Absolutely. I will call him out every week until he does it.
What's the name of this game?
Hey, Noah,
Something
there is
weird.
nobody I know, and I mean this true to heart, that can basically put on in a second you've done this as a joke before. When was it with Browsh and other thing? Put on a character, sell something that you don't believe in at all for the fun of it. So I need your help this week to help.
Okay, sure. Yeah.
The game is called The Great
figure out where that conversation
Geometric
was going.
Multiverse.
I'm gonna need a special.
Okay, all right. Hey, Ryan, you pick a day when you've got a night available, and we'll get together on Mumble.
We'll work
1.3.0, and we'll work something out. This is gonna be good. This is gonna be really good. You don't know what you asked for, but you're about to get the best video game review you've ever seen in your life.
Excellent.
We're gonna
look forward to
half
it.
the Linux playing world is gonna play whatever this game is.
So the software spotlight this week is eSpeak and GE Speaker. And these are tools that, like the GE Speaker is a GTK front-end GUI for eSpeak. And if you're not familiar, eSpeak is a tool that converts text to speech and allows you to change you can have a male voice or a female voice, and also control the pitch and speed of that. So it'll help you if you have, if you're a blind user and you want to have it teaching you, using the text to tell you what you're actually reading and that kind of thing. So it's an accessibility tool. It's kind of like Orca, but it's not a screen reader. It's more of just for text to speech. And there's actually another tool I found, but it's not technically ready yet, so that's why I didn't put it in the show notes. But it's a Qt based thing, so when that's ready, I will put it in the show notes. But it's a fun tool to play with, as well as using for auto translating text into other languages, if you can do that as well. So if you're interested in checking out eSpeak and GE Speaker, we'll have a link in the show notes.
Our tip and trick this week, again, kind of continuing on the line of data and data privacy, data security. How would you like to be able to access all of your stuff remotely from anywhere? There's a number of different ways to do that. I've done a couple of tutorials on WireGuard, which I think is going to be the future of VPN technology. But WireGuard, as much as I love it, as great as it is still not to a place where you're going to go rolling it out in a bunch of different enterprises. And the reason for that is because there are some limitations based on the fact that it has to run inside of the kernel. One of the nice things about OpenVPN is that it has a long track history of being a very secure protocol as a way to VPN into other systems. The problem with OpenVPN traditionally has been it takes a long time to set up and you kind of have to know what you're doing. So I've come across, I didn't write it, but I have come across a script, and it literally is a bash script that you run. It will ask you a couple of questions. What would you like to call your VPN? What is the IP address that you want, your public IP address that you want to be able to connect into? What port would you like to use? And you enter all of these things and it will do everything you need to set up a VPN server and generate the client certificates with the password or without, depending on if you push 1 or 2 on the interactive menu prompt, and then send those out. So I tested it before we went on the air this week just to see how long it would take. For reference, it takes me about 30 minutes to set up OpenVPN start to finish. Create all the users, create all the certificates, set up the server, do all the port forwarding, all that stuff. About 30 minutes. And I do it a lot. This script got the entire process, one user, but got the entire process down for me to be able to connect in about 45 seconds. So that gives you an idea of how efficient this is. So we're going to have... So cool. It is cool. So we're going to have a link to it. As long as you can forward, as long as you know how to run a bash script, / you have a CentOS server, and you're willing to install the OpenVPN client on your laptop, you will be able to access your network securely, remotely, and with the same standard used industry-wide across any enterprise network, because OpenVPN has established itself as a very robust, secure way to VPN in. So you can check those out. Make sure the only place you're going to be able to get this script is, unless you do all the digging like I did, the only place you're going to be able to get this script is in the Destination Linux show notes. So make sure to check those out. If you're not checking them out, then you're only getting part of the show, because what we talk about doesn't encompass the full breadth of all of the stuff that is actually there and all the information that is available to you. So make sure to be checking out those show notes each week.
Absolutely.
So a big thank you to all of our patrons and each and every one of you watching and supporting and listening to us. It is beyond humbling, the idea that we can do a live stream and have nearly at the peak 300 plus people watching us live, to have the support that we do from our patrons, to have so many people help us to be able to accomplish the goals that we have here with Destination Linux Network. So thank you. We love all of our Patreon and Ko-fi supporters. We love everybody who comments on the shows, who takes the time to send us emails, that helps us do artwork for the shows, that help us build the servers and infrastructure behind this. Michael and I worked many late nights, but Michael worked a ton of late nights along with the community to make sure all of this stuff was up and running and available for you to enjoy. And we want to definitely give a special thanks to Michael for putting all that work into there. And it's just also the community that stepped in to help him. When they saw him up there late at night, everybody jumped in, helping build these servers and make this a reality. We couldn't do this without you, the community. We mean that. We would never have grown from the humble beginnings we talked about to get to this point without you. So thank you so much for your insane but loving support that you constantly give this show.
Those scenes don't build themselves. We need your help as the community. And you can do that because we're on Ko-fi as a way to support the show. That's right. You can support the show by giving us a nice monthly donation that will allow you to have the same perks as those folks on Patreon, except you're way cooler because you're on Ko-fi, and you, unlike the Patreon people, can argue about the pronunciation. There'll be a link in the show notes and on the website to join Ko-fi. The perks includes things like access to live shows, as well as an unedited version of the live show, which includes all of the scene creation that happens each week. Those shows available, as well as our sincere gratitude.
And let's not forget that there are other ways that you can contribute to the community and contribute to the show. So get back to us. Write us a quick email. Let us know things we're doing wrong, things we're doing right, subjects you want us to talk about. Send your emails to comments@destinationlinux.org. Join us on our Telegram group, Discord, Twitter, Mastodon, and a million other ways that Michael is going to make available for us. You can find out that information at destinationlinux.org/contact. So please keep the comments coming. And don't forget, if you can do us a little video, it's even better because there'll be a little swag bag that's coming your way.
Yeah.
Can we talk about the fact we're nearly about to hit 1,000 people in our Telegram group? I mean, we're
awesome.
getting there. So yeah, that's incredible.
Yeah. And if you want to send in the video, try to keep it under a minute if possible. Even shorter is better if so, but a minute is great. If it just, that's like the preferred deadline or timeline, whatever. So anyway, if you want to get more content from us, the fun doesn't stop here. We actually have our own channels. You can check out Ryan by going to youtube.com/DasGeek, where he will fill your brains on hardware, software, all things Linux, and of course the Infinity Gauntlet. And you can check out Zeb. Go to youtube.com/ZebedeeBoss. Zeb can be found playing games on his Zebedee Gaming YouTube channel. You might find an occasional Gentoo installation or how-to as well. And you can check out my content at tuxdigital.com, where I have in-depth weekly Linux Good News podcast, This Week in Linux, and other Linux-related content. You can check out Noah's show. He does the Ask Noah show, which is a weekly talk radio show that happens every Tuesday at 6 p.m. Central, where you can join him and ask all Linux and tech questions. And also now you can go to destinationlinux.network to find all of these things in one central location, as well as the Linux for Everyone podcast that is being on that network as well. So check out the destinationlinux.network to find out to get access to all of these things and much, much more.
Everybody have a great week, and remember, the journey itself is just as important as the destination, Linux Network.
Thanks, everyone. And also be sure to go to the forums, destinationlinux.network, and click on the forum link, and be sure to sign up.